Hey, Jeff Manchester, Manchester Music, welcome. This video is going to be about considerations for monitoring, listening back, mixing, mastering your music on headphones as opposed to speakers. I did a video on, buying new monitors, a beginner's guide, and this is going to be in the sort of same vein. So buying new sort of headphones, a beginner's guide, what you should be thinking about. We live in a world now where people are making music, mixing music, sometimes mastering music on the go. They're not in a professional studio environment. They're not even in a good environment to have monitors set up, so they're listening in headphones. So what should you be thinking about before you go to mix that perfect record with headphones? I'm going to talk about that, 3 points, and then I'm going to finish with my sort of recommendations for headphones. I only really have 2 that I would recommend, so it's going to be pretty brief. If you want to have more information about what I'm talking about, this is sort of following a post that I did for Isotope on considerations for mixing with studio monitors and considerations for mixing with headphones. So I will leave a link to that in the show notes if you want to go check that out and get more information. Let's just jump right in. So the number one consideration you should be thinking about when you're mixing with headphones is the fact that just because you can mix with headphones doesn't mean you should only mix with headphones. What do I mean by this? When people listen to music, they don't always listen to music on headphones. They listen to audio and music and audio events and sound in an acoustic environment, in a real environment where the audio is coming out of 1, 2, 7, 5 speakers. And sound behaves very differently in an acoustic space. And if you are listening to monitors, if you're listening to headphones and only listen to your mix on headphones, and you've got that perfect, mix, and you send it off to your mastering engineer or whatever, and then it gets out into the real world and you hear it, it might take on a very different identity. And this is because, again, music, sound reacts differently in an acoustic space. Why? What am I talking about? Every room, it's said, has a sound. And that perfect headphone mix coming out of the monitors might be colored or influenced by the sound of the room. So what I mean by this is there are things called room modes and nulls. A room mode is when a frequency will, come out of the speakers, and if it's in a room with very poor acoustic, acoustic paneling or whatever like that, there's nothing to absorb or diffuse the sounds, it'll meet itself and then amplify. Usually this happens in the low end. Sometimes it happens in the high frequencies too, but sound bounces around, meets itself, amplifies, and so you might get the perception that some bass frequencies are louder than others. The other thing is sometimes frequencies will meet and cancel out, and we call this a null. So we have a sort of deficit in a certain frequency. Why is this important? This is important because if you're working on that perfect headphone mix and you think you're done, you're not, because most people listen to stuff on their laptops, on speakers, wherever. It is true that people, more and more adopt the headphones, earbuds, whatever, but you're not really getting that second check, that reality check, unless you're listening to your stuff in a room that's either very well treated or very poorly treated. You might have to compensate. You might have to add more bass, reduce a little bit of bass. The other thing is that once your sound comes out of speakers in a real environment, it's going to take on a different sort of stereo image. This is because in your headphones, when you're listening to headphones, you're getting pure left and right channel. So things that you've panned around the stereo field, extreme left, extreme right, those things are arriving as they sort of should be. There's no millisecond delay. When you take your headphones off, you listen, from the speakers. They're coming right at you in real time, quickly from left and right. When you, let's say, if you have a drum set that is panned all over the stereo field, you've got your tom sort of left and right, your snare right in the center, your kick right in the center, your hi-hats, your cymbals, left and right, and your hi-hat here on the left in the stereo field on your headphones. That all might come through really precisely as you panned it, because again, pure left, right, this beautiful sort of stereography. Once it comes out of the speakers, those sounds might sound a little bit more narrow, because it's not pure left-right anymore. So you want to see, it's just, what I'm saying is you need a reality check, because sometimes your bass might not be enough, it might be too much, your panning might suddenly collapse. All kinds of issues take on a different identity audio-wise once we take them out of headphones and put them into a real space where we have, a poorly treated room, or just self noise coming from cars and trucks. You can probably hear I've got spadina right behind me, so I've got the sound of things moving and people talking. All of these things influence the extent to which we perceive our audio in an acoustic environment, and you need to be thinking about that when you're mixing on headphones. Get to a friend's place, get to go somewhere where you can just preview your mix, and then you can make sure, you know what, the bass is where it needs to be, the panning is where it needs to be, and yeah, so it's just a reality check. Most people are not listening to music solely on headphones. They're going to listen to it in a club, they're going to listen to it in a car, on their laptop, at their friend's place when they plug into like a Sonos system or whatever. Very important for you to be getting a reality check. Just because you get that perfect headphone mix doesn't mean it's going to be perfect once it hangs out in an acoustic environment, okay? That's number one for mixing with headphones. Okay, number two for mixing with headphones. Be aware of coloration. What do I mean by this? Well, in the post that I did for Isotope, I couldn't really call out any brands or anything or any models, because you have to kind of be careful with that, because sometimes companies are friendly with one another, and then they'll read something and be like, hey, are you saying that, so I couldn't really be very direct with some of my criticism. And not that I'm sort of being direct here, but I would like to really just sort of hit home the fact that some brands and models of headphones are colored in their frequency response. What is the frequency response? This is the frequency curve at the output stage of the sort of listening experience. So you might have recorded something and it has a very sort of lovely curve that's consistent with how people perceive loudness of certain frequencies, Fletcher-Munson curve, whatever, and you've got a nice neutral sound in the bass, and you have sort of some dips in the mid and then some nice sort of shimmery highs. So it looks like a kind of a nice S, which was very popular in the 70s and 80s for EQ curves at the mastering stage. You might listen to it on headphones, or your audience might listen to it on headphones, or you might be mixing the whole thing on headphones, and the frequency response of the headphones is actually coloring, accentuating, boosting some frequencies. So for example, I guess I'll just say it right now, Beats by Dre. No one on the planet Earth should be mixing a record, mixing their cues on Beats by Dre. First of all, this is just a really sneaky company. I'll leave a link to it in the show notes in the description for this video, but they did a teardown of the first model, I should mention, the first generation of Beats Solo, and they found that the company was just putting metal in the headphones. Why? Why would you put metal in the headphones? It's to increase the kind of perception that you're listening to a high quality product. If it's very heavy, right, you go, oh, it's really heavy, it's really rugged, They found that that was just extra padding, extra BS to make you feel like you were listening to a really pro device. I don't know how much they cost to make, but I know how much they go for. And I'm sure there's a huge disparity between getting the parts, putting them together, and what you pay when you go to Best Buy or Amazon.com. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the company has never really released their frequency response. So people sort of have to model the headphones, throw some frequencies through them, and then sort of guess what the coloration is, what the frequency response is. I'm going to leave a photo here on the page to show you what one company came up with when they were trying to discern the frequency response of Beats by Dre. And this should be really alarming to people. What's happening is, if I flip over to it myself so I know what I'm talking about, there is a boost of almost what looks to be 7 dBs in the lows, so probably around, I'd say, somewhere from 50 to 100 hertz, a boost there. There's another boost of around what looks to be 3 dBs happening probably at 7K, and then another boost at a whopping, looks like about 11, 12 dBs in the highs, so probably at around, I'm going to say, maybe 10 to 15K. It's not really clear, but SonarWorks referenced this model of headphones, and here they say the one that they're simulating, they're very careful with their language. A popular hi-fi open headphone model, simulation by an iconic Brooklyn-based hi-fi headphone producer. The headphone features brown circular wooden outer finishing. Come on, like we all know that. Anyway, so this is Beats by Dre. So why is this a problem? Why is mixing on headphones that have coloration in the frequency response a problem? It's a problem because you're not getting an accurate picture of the frequency response, of the totality of the distribution of frequencies in your audio. You are getting, it's almost like, do you guys know what film grading is? Color correction? Ian Shepherd, mastering engineer, used this analogy, and it's absolutely perfect. It's like color correcting, which is the process of making sure the greens are green in a film and the eyes are, blue or brown or whatever, and the sky is blue. Making sure that those things are in check. It's like color correcting a film while wearing green tinted glasses. Okay? You're getting a distorted picture of reality. That's why you should always seek out a set of headphones with the neutral objective frequency response that is modeled, if you can, off of how our ears perceive frequencies. So, for example, we happen to be very sensitive to stuff around 7K, just the human ear. That's why a lot of stuff like fire alarms, smoke alarms, whatever, it's all happening around that range because we're very sensitive to it, and we actually perceive it to be a lot louder than other frequencies. So that's why you'll sometimes see a bit of a dip in frequency response curves from fairly neutral headphone models around that area, so that we're not having a false sort of understanding of where that frequency is on a loudness spectrum and turning it up or turning it down. And the same thing with bass. Sometimes bass frequencies, we perceive them to be a little bit less loud than other frequencies, so they might add a bit of a boost there, just so that we're not under attenuating or over boosting those frequencies. So you want something that presents a fairly objective, neutral frequency response, and you want to stay away from headphones that color the frequencies and sort of lie and sort of trick you into thinking that things are louder than they actually are. Now, I know that this is not a very scientific video, obviously. I mean, I'm in my bachelor, I got a Dyson in the back, you know what I mean? This is not, I'm not wearing like a lab coat, in front of a Neve console. This is just my opinion. But it makes it difficult because Beats will not release the information around their frequency curves. And I see a lot of people, a lot of very young people that just want to make, fiery beats and all that stuff, mixing. And once they mix, they might get a really loud bass sound in their headphones when they're mixing. So they might turn the bass down on their, on their master, right? Because it sounds a little hot there. They might also turn the upper frequencies down because we have that boost there at around 7 or 12K or 10K. I'm not really sure where it was in the SonarWorks modeling photo. So then when it gets out into the real world and it's played back on a system with a fairly neutral frequency response that we all, are used to, the bass might sound kind of quiet and the highs might sound kind of quiet, and it might sound all mid-rangey because you were color correcting with green tinted glasses. You were making tweaks and analyzing your audio in an unobjective way, and that is a big problem. You cannot do that. So, number one, be aware of how sound behaves in an acoustic space. Get a reality check when you're mixing on headphones. Try and do it in an open space. Number two, be aware of headphone coloration. Do your homework. When you're going to buy your new, headphones or whatever to mix on, do your research. Ask, look at the documentation, see what the frequency response is. If you're seeing big dips and boosts or cuts in certain areas, ask, write the manufacturer what's going on here. Are these proper for monitoring? Are these more casual listening headphones that I should be listening for leisure or whatever like that? Be aware that coloration is happening. It's to trick you into thinking that, you're listening to a premium product. I'm talking about metal inside before. All that stuff, be really aware of the fact that people are trying to sell you a product. That's what they're trying to do. And if you think that the bass is so much louder in your headphones or whatever like that, it's because that's what the manufacturer intended. So those are the first two things. Moving on to the last thing. Multiple headphones. Listen to your mix on multiple headphones. So we often hear from people in the field, pros, that they mix on different monitors, and I mentioned this also in my video when I did my buying new monitors, a beginner's guide. We hear that people will monitor on different output systems to ensure what's called, translation, so that things sound good between, your Focals and your NS10s and whatever like that. So the same should be true of headphones. People have adopted, I'm kind of contradicting my first point a little bit. People have adopted, widespread, a lot of different headphones, especially Beats. But they're also going to stuff from Bose, which often have a lot of coloration and all the rest of it. So you should be listening. You should be getting your hands on, a pair of cheap headphones, high quality headphones, earbuds, and listening to make sure that the mix sounds good between those formats. So get in a quiet place, close the window, unplug the fridge if you live in a bachelor apartment where you can hear every sound, and just really concentrate on how each model sounds. Look at the frequency response and think about how that's translating to some really great. That's the other thing, is that you have to listen to really great, well-regarded mixes. I will leave a couple in the show notes. One of them that I just discovered after being at GearFest. I was listening to a lecture by Enrique Gonzalez, one of our artists who works with us at Isotope, and he put on Stiff Upper Lip by AC/DC. That has incredible dynamic range. The stereography is really rich and, you know, well sort of divided. It's not too loud. And it's just, it's great. So listen to well-regarded, classy mixes on different sets of headphones. They should translate properly. And listen to your own. If they don't translate properly, it's probably because at the source, at the mix stage, it wasn't done properly. But you should also just be aware of the tonal differences in coloration and frequency response. For example, when you put on a couple of Apple earbuds, I haven't tried the new EarPods, but the earbuds, those do not have a good frequency response as far as bass is concerned, and they sound a bit tinny, a bit shrill at around 7 to 12K. So be aware of that when you're mixing. The same thing goes for, you know, these AT M50Xs, I think they're M50Xs, yeah. These guys are very flat and very neutral, so I'm not going to get a lot of coloration. The bottom line is, listen to your mix on a number of headphones and think about the audience. Who's going to be listening to this? I'm not saying make a different mix for every sort of headphone. Don't do that. But the bottom line is, you should be making, at the source, a really great mix so that it sounds great on every output format, headphones-wise. That's what you'll notice if you put on Stiff Upper Lip by AC/DC. It sounds great no matter where you're listening to it. Not too much bass. Frequency distribution is great. Dynamic range is great. It sounds excellent. That's what you should be aiming for. Make your great mix in your headphones, preview it in your space, be aware of coloration, then go to a number of headphones you have. Listen on each one to make sure that it's translating, because more and more people are deciding to listen on headphones, and people are expecting a sort of world-class listening experience on headphones. So be aware of that. Now, we're not just monitoring across different sort of speakers, we're also monitoring and making sure we have nice translation across a bunch of headphones. A lot of pros are doing this. A lot of people in Toronto that I know are doing this. There's a guy who is mixing, what's his name? Frank Ocean. And he was saying that now he'll check, you know, he checks on his studio monitors, the big ones, the near fields, and then he'll check on his nice headphones, his crappy headphones, etc., etc. So be thinking about that too. So get more than one pair, get consumer grade stuff, get some nice stuff. Now, as to the final point, what should you buy? What should you buy when you're mixing headphones? Obviously, from the last couple of points that you've heard me talk about, you should be going for something with a neutral, objective, uncolored frequency response. That's very important. But can I be more specific? All right, of course. So this is subjective. This whole video is subjective. The whole channel is subjective. But I really recommend Audio-Technica M50Xs. Pretty much anything in this range is really good, very neutral. If you have a lot of money to spare, I would recommend the Sennheiser 800Ss. There's 800 and 800S. S was like the, you know, the next iteration of it, the updated version. I don't own a pair of them. I have tried them. I have spoken to Sennheiser reps. I listened to them when I was at NAB in Vegas a couple months ago, and they are the real deal. They're incredible. Very pristine, nothing very sour or colored about them, and just the detail in them was really impressive to me. They are extremely expensive. Okay, they're like around the M50, or sorry, the 800Ss are, I think, around 14 or 15 or 1600 US. So, the timer went off here. That is one of those, like, get what you pay for kind of things. So, those would be the headphones that I'd recommend. Stay away from Beats. If you've gotten nothing from this video, just stay away from Beats by Dre, unless you're just listening back to something, or unless you're using the Beats as a reference set of headphones. So, let's recap. Number one, space. Be aware of how acoustic space affects your perception of left and right of certain frequencies, especially in the low end. Number two, headphone coloration. Do your homework. Know what you're getting into. Know that you are not being lied to by your headphones. Look for something with an objective frequency response. And learn also about how our ears and our brains perceive frequencies differently loudness-wise. Number 3, multiple headphones. People mix on multiple monitors. You should be mixing on multiple headphones. And the final recommendation is AT M50Xs are great. That's like my little pick. And if you have a little bit more money than that, the Sennheiser 800Ss are really good. If I think of more, I will leave them in the show notes. Thank you so much for watching. And yeah, go out and mix informed, arm yourself intellectually with everything you can about the frequency response, the room, blah, 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 and then you'll have better sounding, smarter mixes, and you'll be a better mixing engineer or mastering engineer. All right, take care.